My name is Paul Hart. I'm a military officer with the Royal Navy. I've worked with the military for some 30 plus years now. And throughout that time, I've had a number of sort of facets of what I've done in dealing with expeditions and outdoor activities and training people. And I've spent a lot of my life leading people in quite challenging circumstances.
That all sounds super exciting, and I've got loads of questions. But before I jump into that, what does a military officer mean? What does that role involve?
So I'm a Royal Navy officer, and at this moment in time, I'm running all training for all of the reserves in the UK. So they come to me, and I run the training that they undertake, and I deliver training to them, which allows them then to go forwards and continue their professional training. So I'm the sort of first part. When they first join up, I run them through a training program, which allows them then to become officers and ratings in the Royal Navy as reservists, and then they go forward into their specialist careers, and other people take over that specialist career training.
Wow, that's amazing, and such a cool job as well. One that I didn't know even existed. That's amazing. How on earth did you get into that role?
Well, as I said, I spent most of my life working for the military, and having done 30 years of service with the Royal Navy, I then started what's called a full-time reserves career. So I've been working for the reserves, having finished my full-time regular employment. I left, went and worked abroad, ran my own business, and then an offer came up which was too good to ignore. So I decided to go back in. And since that time, I've been involved in training other people in the Royal Navy. So I'm a reservist, but I'm working full-time training people in the regular and the reserve Navy.
And I guess, as I think you've just said there, the experience that you've gathered so far has enabled you to train other people in that direction. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a combination of both what the military training has given to me, going through the leadership training that the Navy gave, and going through the professional training that the Navy gave, and then sort of advancing that with my own expeditions across the globe, leaving the military and working in my own business and developing a certain set of skills there, and then actually sort of gathering all that together in one, you'd call it one morass of capability, and then giving it back into the service.
That's amazing. So let's go right back to the beginning. How did you get into the Navy in the first place?
Well, it's a really complicated story, and I don't want to spend hours and hours boring people. Suffice to say, I left home at 17. I had a very unexpected event in my life. My mother passed away without any sort of notice that she was poorly, and as a result of that, I ended up leaving home and living rough for quite some time. And I went from living rough to getting various jobs, and I worked in different areas. I worked in fish market, I worked in farmers' fields, I worked on fishing boats. I ended up working in a paper mill in the southwest of England, in Watchet, and I did all that. And then eventually, when I was that job finished, and I went to sort of try and find some other work, I ended up passing by Plymouth. It was a polytechnic at the time, now a university. And I decided I was going to go in and listen to one of the presentations for various reasons, mostly about getting free coffee and biscuits. And the person who presented about oceanography at that particular event really inspired me. And I'd always had two heroes. Two heroes in my boyhood days were Jacques Cousteau and Robert Falcon Scott. And the course that was presented offered diving as one of the features of the course. And for me, that was enough to convince me that actually this is something I need to do. And I'd been halfway through my A-levels when my mum passed away. And so I had enough with my A-levels to be able to go to university, go to Polytechnic. And that I did. And then began my sort of learning career. I went to the Polytechnic. I suddenly found I was reasonably competent at learning, and because I was interested in what I was doing. I came away with a what's called a 2-2 degree, which was sufficient then to do other jobs. I went to work as a computer programmer, even though I had very little programming experience. I worked for the university as a programmer, and at that time my interest in the military was ignited. So after doing that for a while, I then joined the army, and I was in the army for a number of years. I then left the army to join the Navy because I wanted a different career track, and that was it. I became a naval officer, went to Dartmouth, did the training at Dartmouth, and then had that sort of 29 years of further training and training others and delivering operational output in the Navy.
And what would you say has been kind of the biggest thing that you've taken from your time in the Navy?
Opportunity. Opportunities are amazing. To be able to, when I first started, traveling the world was a fairly unusual event, and the Navy offered that. Travel around the world has become much more commonplace, but the method of travel and the opportunity to do other things that have been afforded to me. So my expeditions largely were within the Navy. Kayaking around the outside coastline of Alaska, the first unsupported kayak around the outside coastline of Alaska, doing first descents of Himalayan peaks, and not only that, doing medic training, which then inspired me to go and do further training outside of the military training that was delivered to me to enable me to become an offshore medic, and then a emergency medical technician, and then do the advanced life saving in Derriford Hospital. So all of those things, which actually being in the military gave me the opportunity to do.
Really sounds like you're someone who's made the most of every opportunity and had a really varied career. So you mentioned that you ran your own business for a bit of time after you left the Navy. Do you mind expanding on that a little bit and telling us a bit more about what you've been up to since?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I first left, I set up a business. In fact, actually, I set up the business while I was in the military, knowing I was going to leave. And it was very much around leadership and personal development training, but it also involved a lot of additional skills. I did a number of courses within the military to do with counselling and personal development. I used a thing called neuro-linguistic programming. So I trained very heavily in that area, but I also had presentation skills. So I developed presentational packages. And from that came a plethora of skills, which allowed me to then run a business, looking at how I would help other people be the best they could possibly be. And in terms of some of the experiences that I've had of being on mountains and some quite catastrophic experiences on expeditions and dealing with danger, how to be resilient, how to deal with difficulty in challenging times. So I've then placed that back into the sort of the environment, into the workplace environment, and I've worked with things like Barclays Board. I've worked with various companies, international companies, including Harmony Gold in South Africa, delivering leadership training and developing their people. That's where I regard my sort of number one skill is in helping people to become the best they can possibly be in a variety of fields.
That's amazing and so inspiring and just really heartwarming to hear, actually. And now it feels like you've gone full circle and you're taking the skill set that you've developed outside of the Navy, along with the skills and opportunities that you took within the Navy, and you've taken them back in. Is that right? Is that what you're doing?
Pretty much. So the opportunity now gives me, it's absolutely fantastic. I bring lots of people in to the military environment, and I try to ensure that they are the best they can possibly be, and therefore able to do what, in times of crisis and in times of normal work, they operate at peak performance. That's really where the focus is. So it's very much allowing the individual to grow and using coaching techniques, and also ensuring that they have certain factors, which is one, understanding themselves and understanding others, being able to understand what their perceived limitations are, because those are generally self-imposed, how to overcome those self-imposed limitations, and try and make sure that they can always excel, always go one step further.
What would you say to people that want to maybe follow in your footsteps or do a similar job to what you're doing at the moment? How would you encourage them to excel?
take every opportunity to learn something new. So obviously, if they want to join the military, they have to go through the process of going through the recruitment process and joining whichever military organisation they wish to. And I say it's not just in the military. I'd say it's for everybody. I think take every opportunity to learn something new, to learn a new skill, a new way of operating, a new piece of knowledge, because having that will make your life ultimately so much more fulfilling. You'll be able to do so much more. So from kayaking around Alaska to climbing on mountains to crossing Antarctica, the peninsula, to being able to teach, so I trained as a teacher while I was in the military. I actually got my teacher qualifications as well, just by the sort of distance learning process and going through the various stages of a learning program. There is nothing you cannot do if you set your mind to it, and you can do everything. I trained as a medic, I've trained as a teacher, trained as a climber, trained as a mountain guide. All of these things are there and available. You just have to do them.
That's absolutely incredible. And I almost want to finish there because it's so powerful. But Paul, I've got to ask you one last question. If you could go back to 16-year-old you and give 16-year-old you one piece of advice, what would that be?
So I probably wouldn't be able to give them just one piece of advice. I wouldn't be able to give me one piece of advice because I'd know that I'd need more than that. But I think the number one piece of advice is whatever people say, take note of what they say, be considerate of what they say, but don't worry about what they say. Do what you need to do and what you want to do, because life is an adventure. And at times it will be hard. I have been through those hard times. It's not like it's all just flows magically. But no matter how bad it seems, there's an opportunity which will arise, which will allow you to step out of whichever difficulty you're facing, and you can always overcome. You just have to work out what it is you need to do to take that step change and overcome. And I've been there several times. It doesn't just, the passing of my mum was not the first major challenge I've had in my life. And you do just, as long as you keep at it, as long as you think and you think out of the box and you take your opportunity, it will come good. I'm a firm believer in it will come good.
That's really amazing and such an inspiring message. So thank you so much. Thanks for your time, Paul. And I've certainly got a load more questions, and I'm sure other people, and they can always ask you more things on Like to Be as well. So
that would be fantastic. Yeah, if I can help in any way, I will do.